The members who have contributed have adequately covered the subject matter, that of violence, and specifically violence against women and children. So, Madam Speaker, I'm merely endorsing and supporting what has been said in the House. But I wanted to add another dimension to the conversation. Madam Speaker, for many years, we have been ambivalent, both as a parliament, as a government, and as a people, about violence. The ultimate measure of violence is the loss of life. It is a discrete way of measuring the concept of violence, especially if the loss of life was as a result of physical force. Madam Speaker, we measure that in Jamaica every day with the murder rate. It is an index for which we pay very close attention. Madam Speaker, but before we get to that accurate measure of violence, there are many other forms of violence for which the society, Madam Speaker, treats with less seriousness and outrage. And if, Madam Speaker, we were firm in our stance as a parliament, as a government, and as a people generally, against all forms of violence, then the ultimate escalation to the loss of life would be minimized. But, Madam Speaker, when will we agree as a society that when we beat our children mercilessly, we are teaching them that the only way to resolve conflict is through violence? Madam Speaker, when will we agree that the person's body is inviolable, meaning that I have a right for you not to touch me, and that every woman inside here has a right to say no? And we don't interpret it as feeling that you're better than me. When, Madam Speaker, it is the ambivalence in the society that is permissive of violence, that we don't recognize that everyone has that right to the preservation of their physical form, whether or not they are children or adults, that the human person is inviolable. Madam Speaker, when will we reach the point as a society where we come to the understanding that in our art form, in our music, and in our culture, in as much as you are free to reflect what is happening in the society, you also have a duty to place it in context. That to take up the AK-47 and done it in a man's head, that is not right. And though you have the protection of the Constitution to sing about it, you also have a duty to the children who are listening to you to say, man, that is not right. And until the society comes to the understanding that all forms of violence is wrong, but we are not there yet. Because as I speak today, I'm expecting the headlines tomorrow. Leave this one alone. Leave that alone. Go talk about something else. But that is it. We are not yet serious. in a sense, Madam Speaker, I am happy to see the outrage, because it tells me that there is a change happening in the society. Unfortunately, it is for 9 days at a time. It is not sustained. And I have recognized that. I am not new to this wicket, Madam Speaker. I am not new to this wicket of speaking about violence. In 1996, the World Health Organization classified violence as a global problem and started to study the epidemiology of violence, started to place violence into a context. And, Madam Speaker, Jamaica has to take an instrumental approach to this matter. It can't be that we come to the House and we just give impassioned speeches. We have to study the problem in Jamaica and put in place the measures to solve it. Having recognized this whilst I was the Minister of Education, and having this struggle, the social struggle about how we discipline our children and how do we put in place non-violent means of behavior modification, with great resistance from institutions that should be against the violence, but are grounded, indeed anchored to perspectives that are not enlightened. Madam Speaker, in 2019, I empaneled a commission, the National Commission for Violence Prevention. And that commission has started its work. It has presented to me recently, and I have approved their national strategic plan. It is not their intention to reinvent what has already been done, because if you look across all agencies in government, Madam Speaker, there is something there that speaks to some work that is already ongoing regarding violence, whether it is interpersonal, whether it is intimate partner violence, whether it is children, violence against women, domestic violence, all these forms of violence. The government is doing work. The challenge, Madam Speaker, is that it is not coordinated, and it is probably not funded, and it is not led by a national policy. And so what we're doing, we've been working very quietly. Professor Sams Vaughan, internationally known researcher in areas such as these, child development and other areas. She is the chairman of the commission, and it is empaneled our other experts in the field. And I'm expecting that within a year we should be getting a report which will enable the government then to come to the country with a comprehensive strategy, not just a strategy for the government, but for all stakeholders to participate, so we can have a clear roadmap that how together, government, opposition, church, all stakeholders can speak with one common voice against violence. So, Madam Speaker, I want to reassure the nation that the outrage is there, the Parliament, myself as Prime Minister, our role is to respond to the outrage of the people and be the voice of the people. But more than that is to take that outrage to fuel new policy and make the changes that people want to see. And I want to assure the country that that process is ongoing and going fairly well. We don't always, we are not always able to bring these matters to the public attention. I have spoken about it before. It probably would never have made headlines. It probably has not made any headlines because it is not considered news. It may very well make some headlines now because there is a public attention to it. But assure the public, Madam Speaker, that the government takes this matter of violence seriously, and we have been working towards it. Madam Speaker, I wanted to, before I close, and I don't know if the leader of the opposition would agree with what I'm saying, but Jamaica still has a far way to go in treating with violence. But we have done something in this country which has had an impact on violence. Many Jamaicans may not immediately see it, but when we passed the Indicom legislation, it was a groundbreaking piece of legislation to curb state violence. Very important piece of legislation. Because if we're going to treat with violence and the use of force, then the state must be an example of how it uses force that it is authorized to use. So, Madam Speaker, it is not impossible for the country to make legislation and institutions to have an impact on how other institutions in the country use violence, such as our schools, such as families, intimate partners. So the capacity exists, but we have to get the country to the point where there is sufficient agreement broadly in the society that we can craft legislation towards it. So, Madam Speaker, when you look at the statistic of police killings pre-Indicom and post-Indicom, you can clearly see that there is a major change. It is not going to be an overnight change, because whilst you have changed the institutions, you are then going to have to rely on that institutional change making an impact on culture. So we still have some ways to go for the average policeman on the street to acknowledge that his authority, though he carries a firearm and he could use it, that is last resort. And that his role is there to serve and protect, regardless of how people speak terribly to them. That is a professionalism that is needed. And, Madam Speaker, I believe that this Parliament, this government, and our people, we have the capacity to look at where our society is going and say, this is not where we want Jamaica to be. So, Madam Speaker, I support the calls for the review of the sentencing process. And I'm happy that the leader of the opposition has acknowledged that it is time to look at that. When I visited Ms. Jackson's mother, her private plea to me and then her public statement is that she wants the perpetrator to feel the full effect of the law. She wants him to get the full sentence. She wants him to get justice. So, Madam Speaker, the pressure is building on us inside this House to respond. People are fearful. But just to be clear, Madam Speaker, the statement by the member from, is it East Central St. Catherine? Eastern St. Catherine, is accurate. These underlying conditions that are there, the root problems, whilst we can take short-term measures, we can immediately change the sentencing, change policing, tougher measures, but the underlying issues has to be addressed. So, Madam Speaker, may it please you, and I hope that this debate will carry the public outrage and the energy for change for even longer than 9 days.
Thank you. I think the members of Parliament have spoken, and we have gone way outside the standing orders because the situation demands it. And now I'm going to ask us, as a last mark of respect for the lives lost and the gravity of the situation, acknowledging what we face as a nation, to stand and for a minute's silence in respect of the lives lost in this way.